The flashing red and blue lights painted my driveway like a storm of colors. The sound of the sirens echoed off the trees, bouncing across the quiet cul-de-sac. Neighbors peeked through blinds, dogs barked, and children pressed their faces against windows, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening. 3 police cruisers and a black SUV lined the street in front of my home. The officers stood by their vehicles, hands resting on their belts, eyes locked on the small gray shed behind my house. And there she was, Karen Reynolds, the head of our HOA, standing proudly beside the officers, her arms crossed, chin high, and that same smug smile that had driven everyone in the neighborhood crazy. "There it is, officer," she said, her voice loud enough for the whole world to hear. "That shed violates HOA policy section 4, unauthorized structures. I told him to take it down weeks ago, but he ignored me." I stepped onto my porch, calm as ever, wiping grease off my hands from working inside the shed moments before. I could see her shaking with self-righteous victory, certain that this was her big moment, the one where she'd finally prove to everyone that she could control everything that happened in this neighborhood. But what she didn't know was that the little storage shed she called a violation wasn't just any shed. It wasn't mine. It wasn't even technically on HOA grounds. Inside were sealed crates, coded locks, and surveillance-grade equipment used by the U.S. Marshals Service, and I was the only person authorized to maintain it. I'll never forget the officer's face when he stepped toward the door, hand hovering near his radio, and asked, "Sir, can you open the shed for us?" I smiled faintly. "You sure you want me to do that?" Karen scoffed. "He's bluffing. Just open it. I've got the violation right here." She waved a clipboard like it was her badge of honor. But the moment I reached for the lock and turned the heavy latch, the officer's radio crackled. A voice came through, calm, clipped, and firm. "Unit 47, stand by. That location is restricted federal property. Do not open that door." Karen froze. The officers exchanged looks. I slowly turned the latch back and stepped away, my heart steady, but my mind spinning. How could I even begin to explain this to my nosy, power-hungry HOA president without breaking my federal silence agreement? That was the moment everything changed in our quiet neighborhood. And none of them, not even me, were ready for what came next. It all started a few weeks before that day, back when I was still trying to keep peace with everyone around here. My name's David Morris, retired mechanical engineer, mid-50s, quiet guy, not much for drama. I moved to this neighborhood 3 years ago after losing my wife to cancer. I wanted peace. A little garden, some fresh air, just quiet. The HOA rules seemed strict but fair: no noisy tools, no bright fences, no unapproved structures. Fine by me. That changed when I got a call from an old friend in federal service. He told me there was a small communications relay project being set up for emergency response, part of a larger network the U.S. Marshals were building across rural counties. They needed a local property owner with security clearance and technical know-how. My home, being near the woods and slightly off the main road, was perfect. The shed was to store maintenance tools, backup power units, and encrypted communication devices for emergency use, all legal, all authorized, but under confidentiality. So I built the shed quietly, a sturdy 10x12 structure behind the barn, painted gray to blend in. I had all the permits needed from the county, and a federal clearance letter tucked in my drawer. To any normal person, it was just a shed, but to Karen Reynolds, it was an eyesore, a personal insult to her power. Karen had lived across the street since the neighborhood was built. She was the kind of person who'd measure your grass length with a ruler or report your mailbox color if it didn't match the aesthetic. She ran the HOA like a mini dictatorship: fines for everything, memos in your mailbox for non-compliance, and loud lectures at every community meeting. I tried to stay polite, even fixed her broken fence one time after a storm. But kindness only made her push harder. The trouble started one sunny afternoon when she marched across my lawn in her pink sun hat, sunglasses perched on her nose, and that clipboard in her hand like it was a weapon. "Mr. Morris," she called out, "this structure behind your barn is not listed in our community plans. You'll need to remove it immediately, or face penalties." I smiled gently. "Afternoon, Karen. It's all cleared with the county. I assure you it's authorized." "Authorized?" she scoffed. "Not by me, it isn't." I explained that it wasn't something I could just remove, but I didn't tell her why. The equipment inside wasn't mine to discuss. She didn't like that answer. Her face tightened. "I'll be reporting this to the board." And report it she did, every week, every email, every threat of fines. Still, I kept my calm. I figured she'd move on eventually, like she always did. But then she started watching me. Every time I opened the shed to check on the equipment, her curtains would shift. Her camera light blinked from her window. Once, she even followed the delivery truck that brought a replacement generator to the property. She thought she was catching me breaking HOA rules. One evening, I was inside the shed doing maintenance on the generator's fuel line when I saw her reflection in the small window. She was taking photos. I stepped outside, smiling kindly. "Evening, Karen." She jumped back, nearly dropping her phone. "You can't just build things without board approval." "It's a utility structure," I said calmly. "I know what I saw. You've got wires, boxes, maybe even cameras in there. What are you hiding?" I chuckled lightly. "Just tools, Karen. You don't need to worry." But that only made her more suspicious. By the next morning, I found a letter taped to my front door. "Final warning, non-compliant structure, immediate action required." I sighed, took it down, and sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the sun rise over the trees. I remembered something my wife used to say when life got hard. "Kindness isn't weakness, Dave. It's patience in disguise." I tried to keep that in mind. So I didn't shout at Karen. I didn't fight. Instead, I kept to myself, fixed a neighbor's leaky faucet, helped the Johnsons repair their fence after a storm, and tried to show that not everyone here had to live by fear and control. Slowly, other neighbors started to warm up to me, waving, chatting, even laughing again during morning walks. But that made Karen furious. She wanted to be the center of it all, the one everyone followed. Then came the day that would change everything. That morning, I was inside the shed replacing a sensor cable when I heard footsteps approaching. I looked through the small window and saw Karen pacing near the fence, talking on her phone. Her voice carried over the quiet air. "Yes, officer. He has a large illegal structure behind his barn. Probably dangerous. I've told him to remove it, but he's refused. Yes, I'll be here when you arrive." My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming, but I couldn't stop it. Within minutes, I heard sirens. 3 patrol cars rolled into the street, followed by a black SUV. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains again, murmuring. And Karen stood there, triumphant, waving at them like she'd called in the cavalry. And now, as those officers stood before my shed, I realized the next few moments would change how everyone in this neighborhood saw me and her forever. What would happen if they actually tried to open it? What was Karen going to say when she found out what was inside wasn't some backyard project, but government property? I guess we'll find out soon. Where are you watching from? The air that afternoon felt thick, like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. I stood there on my porch, hands slightly trembling. Not from fear. Karen, however, was absolutely glowing. Her red lipstick gleamed in the sunlight as she crossed her arms with pride, standing tall beside Officer Daniels, who had just stepped out of his cruiser. I recognized him right away. He'd been here before, a good man, calm and reasonable. But even his calm face couldn't hide his confusion as he looked between Karen, the shed, and me. "Mr. Morris," he began, polite as always, "we received a call about a possible unauthorized or unsafe structure on your property." "HOA complaint." Karen cut in before I could speak. "Unsafe is putting it mildly, officer. I've seen wires, lights, and boxes. He's probably running some kind of illegal power grid back there." I almost laughed. Illegal power grid? The equipment inside could support an entire emergency communications network. But I couldn't tell her that. I needed to stay composed. I gestured calmly toward the shed. "It's just a storage unit for tools and maintenance gear. Everything's up to code. You're welcome to check the county permit filed 3 months ago." Karen rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. He probably forged that. Look at it, it's a bunker, not a shed." Officer Daniels raised his hand gently to quiet her, then turned to me. "Sir, for protocol, I'll need to at least confirm the inside isn't being used for illegal purposes. You okay opening it up?" That was the moment my heart skipped. I knew what that shed contained: sealed black crates marked with coded tags, a radio hub linked to satellite relays, and a secure lock that required dual authorization to open fully. If I let them in, I'd violate my clearance agreement. If I refused, I'd look suspicious. "Officer," I said slowly, "this property contains federal equipment under contract. I can't open it without clearance from the U.S. Marshals. But if you want, I can make a call right now." Karen laughed, loud and sharp. "Oh, sure. The U.S. Marshals. Next you'll tell us you're working for the president." A few neighbors chuckled nervously from across the street. They didn't know what to think. Some whispered. Others took out their phones to record. Daniels frowned slightly, his eyes narrowing. Federal equipment? Mr. Morris, are you saying you're working with a government agency? Before I could answer, a sharp crackle came through his police radio again, the same clipped voice as before. Unit 47, hold position. Do not open that structure. Federal authorization pending. The words froze everyone. Karen's smirk vanished instantly. Her hand fell from her clipboard. Daniels looked toward me, his eyebrows lifting slightly. Seems like someone knows about this already. Karen blinked rapidly. What does that mean? Daniels didn't answer. He just stepped aside and spoke quietly into his shoulder mic. Karen's voice grew louder as she realized she was losing control of her show. Officer, you can't just believe that nonsense. It's a shed. A plain, ugly shed. Look at it, it doesn't even match the neighborhood aesthetic. That's a violation. At that, Daniels gave her a look that could cut through steel. Ma'am, I think we're dealing with something outside of HOA business right now. I suggest you stand back. Karen's face went red. Her voice cracked as she shouted, You're taking his side? I kept silent. That's what I'd learned over the years. Sometimes silence speaks louder than anything. The other officers were on their radios now, listening, nodding, looking toward me with an expression that had shifted from suspicion to respect, or maybe caution. Then the black SUV that had parked at the end of the road earlier began to move. The door opened, and out stepped a tall man in a dark suit, sunglasses reflecting the sunlight. His presence was quiet but commanding. Even the police officers straightened instinctively. Karen, of course, didn't get the hint. And who are you supposed to be? She snapped. The man didn't look at her. He simply flashed a badge too quick for the onlookers to read and said in a low, steady voice, Ma'am, please step away from the structure. Karen took a step back, blinking. Excuse me? You can't just... The man ignored her and walked up to me. Mr. Morris, he said softly. We got the ping when the local PD made contact. You did the right thing by not opening the lock. We'll handle it from here. Karen gasped. Ping? What ping? Daniels gestured for her to stay quiet, but she wouldn't stop. You can't just walk in here with sunglasses and act like you own the place. This is private property. Our neighborhood has rules. The man turned slowly toward her. And some rules, he said quietly, go above your neighborhood. That silenced her. Completely. He nodded to me, then stepped toward the shed. He placed a small device against the lock, some kind of scanner, and within seconds, the door clicked open slightly, not enough for anyone to see inside. He took one look, shut it again, and locked it. Everything's secure, he said to Daniels. Karen's voice came out in a whisper now. What is that place? The man didn't answer. He just turned back toward his SUV. You'll be receiving a notice, Mr. Morris. Standard protocol. Expect follow-up clearance in 48 hours. Then, he left, as quietly as he arrived. The officers followed, murmuring to one another. Within minutes, the sirens faded, leaving behind the sound of birds and distant lawnmowers like nothing had happened at all. Karen stood frozen on the edge of my driveway, her clipboard trembling in her hand. Her confidence had cracked like thin glass. This isn't over, she muttered. You think you can just hide behind big words and uniforms, but I'll find out what's really going on here. I sighed. Karen, sometimes it's better not to go looking for answers you're not ready to understand. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't reply. She just turned sharply and stormed back toward her house, muttering to herself. As I walked back to my porch, Bruno, my old Labrador, wagged his tail lazily beside me, sensing the tension fading. I sat on the steps, running my fingers through his fur. The sky had started to turn orange, the kind of evening glow my wife always loved. I felt a pang of peace, mixed with a warning in my gut. Karen wasn't done. I knew her type control was her oxygen. And now that control had been taken away. She was going to come back with something bigger, louder, maybe even worse. And the truth? The shed wasn't the only thing on my property tied to that government project. If she pushed harder, she'd find more than she ever bargained for. And that next discovery could bring real danger to both of us. The neighborhood was silent that night, but it wasn't peaceful. There was a strange kind of quiet, the kind that hums in your ears because your mind refuses to rest. Even Bruno sensed it. He lay by the door, ears twitching every few seconds, eyes locked on the dark yard outside. The shed light glowed faintly in the distance, barely visible through the mist that hung over the grass. After the officers and the man in the black suit left, I had tried to go back to my normal routine. I cooked a simple dinner, watched the evening news, and even tinkered a bit with one of my old radios. But my thoughts kept circling back to Karen. She hadn't spoken to anyone after that confrontation, not even to her usual gossip circle. Her blinds were closed, her porch light was off, and for once, her voice wasn't echoing through the neighborhood. But I knew she wasn't done. Karen Reynolds wasn't the kind of person who gave up. She was the type who'd rather burn down a bridge than let someone else cross it first. Around 10 p.m., I stepped outside for some air. The night smelled of rain and pine. The crickets sang in the woods behind the barn. I stood there for a moment, looking at the shed. The events of the day played in my mind again, the flashing lights, the officer's radio, that man's calm voice. Everything had happened so fast, yet it all felt like a warning. I turned to go back inside when I heard it faint. Slow footsteps crunching on the gravel path behind the fence. Bruno's ears perked up. He let out a low growl. I froze, listening. The steps stopped. "Who's there?" I called out. No answer, just silence. Then, a light, a small white beam flashed near the shed window and vanished. I didn't move for a second. My instincts kicked in. Whoever it was, they were trying to stay hidden. I walked quietly to the porch, grabbed the flashlight near the door, and motioned for Bruno to stay close. The air felt colder now, like the world was holding its breath again. As I crept toward the back of the property, the light flickered once more, this time closer to the shed. I could make out a shadowy figure crouched by the door, fumbling with something metallic. My voice came out firm. "Karen, if that's you, you'd better stop right now." The figure jerked upright, startled. For a second, I saw the outline of a woman's figure. Short hair, light jacket. Then the flashlight beam caught her face. "Karen." She gasped, eyes wide, caught like a thief in her own crusade. You scared me," she stammered. I sighed heavily, lowering my flashlight slightly. "What are you doing here at this hour?" Her voice wavered but still carried that sharp tone. I came to inspect the structure myself. The HOA has every right." "Not at 11 at night, you don't," I interrupted. "This isn't an inspection. It's trespassing." Karen folded her arms tightly, her chin trembling. "You're hiding something in there. I saw the way those men acted today. You think I didn't notice how quickly they arrived? Who are you really, David?" Her voice cracked a bit on my name, like she was scared but too proud to admit it. I took a slow step forward. "You shouldn't be here, Karen. What's inside that shed isn't my secret to share. But I'll tell you this, it's not something you want to mess with." She hesitated, but her eyes darted to the door again. "You're bluffing. I just need one photo, that's all. One picture, and I'll prove to everyone that you're the problem, not me." Before I could stop her, she rushed forward and grabbed the latch. I lunged, shouting, "Karen, don't." But before either of us could move another inch, a sharp click came from above the door, followed by a blinding red light that pulsed once, twice, and then began flashing. Bruno barked wildly as a faint alarm tone echoed from inside the shed. Karen froze, her face pale in the red glow. What is that?" I pulled her back roughly, my heart racing. "That's a tamper alert," I said, voice low. "You just triggered a federal alarm." She shook her head in disbelief. "You're lying." "I wish I was," I muttered. Within seconds I heard the faint hum of engines, not from the street, but from the woods behind the property. 2 black SUVs rolled out from the trees, headlights dimmed. Their doors opened silently, and several men in dark uniforms stepped out, moving with the kind of precision you only see in people trained for it. Karen's jaw fell open. "Oh my goodness." "Yeah," I said, stepping slightly in front of her. "You might want to stay behind me this time." The lead agent approached swiftly, his voice calm but commanding. "Mr. Morris, we received a perimeter breach alert from the shed sensors. Everything under control?" I nodded slightly. "It is now. HOA president got curious." Karen tried to speak but could only stammer. I didn't mean to." The agent gave her a single look, unreadable behind his dark glasses. "Ma'am, this area is now restricted. Please step back to your residence immediately." She nodded rapidly, trembling as 2 agents guided her toward her driveway. As she walked away, her head was down, her confidence shattered. The red light from the shed stopped flashing, and the agents moved inside briefly, checking the systems before resetting the alarms. The lead agent turned back to me. "We'll increase the security perimeter for the next 48 hours. You did the right thing again, Mr. Morris. Keep your contact lines open." I nodded. "She won't try that again." He gave me a look that said he wasn't so sure. People like her rarely stop when they think they're right. Then, just like before, they were gone. No sirens, no lights. Only the quiet hum of their engines fading into the distance. Karen's porch light flicked on moments later. Through her window, I could see her pacing back and forth, clutching her phone, probably rehearsing her next move or deciding who to call. I locked the shed and returned to the porch. Bruno rested his head on my knee, still uneasy. I looked toward Karen's house and sighed. I didn't want enemies. I never did. I just wanted peace. But in neighborhoods like ours, peace always had a price. And deep down, I knew tonight's mistake had set something much bigger in motion. Karen had crossed a line. And soon, someone else might come asking why the head of an HOA was poking around a restricted federal relay. I looked at the shed one last time before heading inside. The soft wind rustled through the trees, whispering like it knew something I didn't. This wasn't the end. Not even close. The next morning came heavy with silence. The kind that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels like the calm before something you can't stop. I woke up early, still half expecting to hear the low hum of the SUVs outside or see the flashing red light from the shed. But everything was quiet. Too quiet. Even the birds seemed cautious. Bruno lay by the door, tail barely wagging, his eyes locked on the front yard. I brewed coffee, the kind my late wife used to love, trying to convince myself the night before was over. But the truth lingered, in the back of my mind. Karen had gone too far, and now, the situation was no longer just an HOA feud. She'd triggered a federal alarm. People in black SUVs had appeared from the woods. That wasn't something that would just fade away. I sat on the porch, watching the sun peek over the rooftops. The neighborhood looked the same, kids riding bikes, sprinklers hissing, mail trucks passing by, but I could feel the tension underneath. Everyone had heard or seen something last night. They just didn't know what it meant. Around 8, I heard the familiar sound of Karen's voice across the street. It wasn't her usual loud, commanding tone. It was lower, quieter, but filled with panic. She was talking to someone, maybe her friend Linda, the one who always sided with her at meetings. I don't know who they were, Karen was saying. They came out of nowhere, black cars, no badges. They told me to go home like I was a criminal. You think I can just ignore that? I sipped my coffee, shaking my head. Of course she wouldn't ignore it. 10 minutes later, the mail truck stopped at my driveway. The mailman waved nervously, even he looked like he'd heard rumors. He handed me a single large envelope, heavier than normal. Marked U.S. Department of Justice. My stomach tightened. I stepped inside, tore it open carefully, and unfolded the letter. It read, Mr. David Morris, following last night's perimeter breach and unauthorized civilian contact, federal oversight will be temporarily extended to your property for monitoring and protection. You are instructed to maintain operational discretion. All equipment and materials under contract remain under your care. Federal presence will be discreet, but consistent. You are advised to avoid further civilian confrontation regarding the structure. Office of Federal Coordination, U.S. Marshals Service. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. The words, discreet, but consistent, echoed in my mind. They meant only one thing they'd be watching. Always. Bruno barked suddenly, his head snapping toward the window. I followed his gaze, and saw Karen standing at the edge of her driveway, staring right at me. Her phone was in her hand. I raised the letter slightly, just enough for her to see the header. She squinted, stepped back, then turned and hurried into her house. I should have felt relief, but I didn't. That look in her eyes wasn't fear anymore. It was determination. She wanted answers, and she was going to get them one way or another. Later that afternoon, I drove into town for groceries, bread, canned soup, and some new batteries for the generator. Everything felt normal until I noticed a silver sedan in my rearview mirror. It stayed 2 cars behind me the entire trip, turning when I turned, stopping when I stopped. When I pulled into the grocery parking lot, the car parked 3 spaces away. A man sat inside, sunglasses on, pretending to read a newspaper. I didn't recognize him, but I didn't need to. I knew he wasn't from the neighborhood. Probably one of the discreet monitors mentioned in the letter. Fine, I thought. Let them watch. I had nothing to hide. When I got back home, a white envelope was taped to my front door. No stamp, no address. Just my name written in Karen's neat, looping handwriting. Inside was a single page. David, I don't know what's going on, but I can't sleep. Those men scared me. I've lived here 20 years and never seen anything like that. If you're involved in something dangerous, the neighborhood deserves to know. I'm giving you a chance to explain before I report this to the county and the press. Karen. The press. My blood ran cold. She was really going to do it. I folded the letter carefully, sat on the porch, and watched the clouds move above the pine trees. I didn't hate Karen. Truth be told, I pitied her. People like her needed control to feel safe, and when they lost it, they panicked. She thought she was protecting the community. But if she called the wrong people, she could expose something that wasn't meant to be seen. That evening, I saw movement across the street again. Karen was on her porch with Linda, waving her hands as she spoke quickly. Linda looked shocked. Then Karen pointed straight at my house. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Here we go again, I murmured. Not long after, Bruno started barking at the end of the driveway. I looked up and saw a drone, small, white, with blinking lights hovering near the barn. It buzzed softly, moving back and forth like it was filming. I stepped off the porch and waved my arms. Hey, you can't fly that here. The drone zipped higher and retreated toward Karen's house. I could see her standing in her yard, remote control in hand, glaring at me from across the street. That was the final straw. I walked toward her yard, calm but firm. Karen. This needs to stop. She met me halfway, still clutching the controller. Stop? You brought secret agents into this neighborhood, David. You expect me to stay quiet? I have every right to document what's happening here. Those agents were only here because you triggered an alarm on government property, I said quietly. She blinked. Government property? I shouldn't have said that. Her expression changed instantly. A mix of shock, curiosity, and dangerous excitement. So it's true, she whispered. There is something in that shed. Before I could reply, a dark SUV rolled slowly down the street again. The same one from before. Its tinted windows glided past us, pausing briefly in front of her yard. Karen's confidence faltered for a split second. The SUV turned the corner and disappeared. She swallowed hard, looking back at me. They're watching us, aren't they? I didn't answer. For a moment, she seemed small, not bossy or loud, just scared. But then her pride returned. You might intimidate the others, but not me, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I'm finding out the truth, even if it means calling the local news. And just like that, she stormed back toward her porch, her drone still hovering above. I stood there watching her door slam shut, the sound echoing through the quiet street. Something deep inside told me this was the beginning of the storm. Because if she really went public, the U.S. Marshals wouldn't just be watching anymore. They'd be acting. And when that happened, the whole neighborhood would learn what was really hiding behind my barn. The night after Karen's drone stunt felt longer than any night I'd had in years. I didn't sleep much. Every creak in the house made me sit up. Listening, every rustle of wind against the windows made Bruno's ears twitch. Somewhere out there, I knew Karen was planning her next move, and somewhere else, the people in the black SUV were watching, waiting to see what she'd do. By 2 a.m, I finally gave up on sleep and went out to the porch. The moon was low, hiding behind clouds, and the woods beyond the barn were darker than ink. I poured myself some coffee and watched the faint outline of the shed in the distance. Everything seemed still, until Bruno's low growl broke the silence. He stood at attention, his nose pointed toward the road. A car engine was idling nearby, not loud, but steady. The sound grew closer. I set my mug down slowly. Then headlights flashed once, twice. It wasn't the HOA this time. It was the same black SUV. The vehicle rolled to a stop in front of my house, and 2 men stepped out, their suits almost blending into the dark. One of them I recognized, the tall one from before, the same man who'd told Karen to step back that first day. He approached the porch quietly, nodding toward me. Evening, Mr. Morris, he said, though it was already well past that. Sorry for the unannounced visit. I stood, trying to hide my tension. You folks aren't exactly the 9-to-5 type, are you? He smirked faintly. Not when it comes to security. We had an incident earlier this evening. My pulse quickened. Karen again? He paused before answering. Possibly. A data ping was picked up from an unauthorized device camera transmission, within 100 feet of your relay shed. We traced the signal to this area. I exhaled. That'd be her drone. He nodded. We figured as much, but we need to be sure. Can you confirm she was operating it? Yes, I said. She flew it right over the shed in broad daylight. I told her to stop. The man sighed, pulling out a small tablet and typing something. That footage may have been stored or transmitted. If it gets uploaded publicly, Our hands are tied. We'll have to secure the equipment off-site. I frowned. You mean remove it? He looked me straight in the eye. Exactly. And you know what that means. If they removed the shed, it would mean the end of the project and the end of my contract. The relay system I'd spent months maintaining would be dismantled, and the quiet little life I'd built here would vanish. What if I can talk to her? I asked. He raised an eyebrow. Talk to her? She's scared, that's all. If I can calm her down, make her see reason, she won't share anything. The man studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. You've got 48 hours. After that, we step in. And just like that, he turned and walked back to the SUV. The taillights disappeared into the fog, leaving me alone again, me, Bruno, and the growing sense that time was running out. The next morning, I saw Karen's curtains open for the first time since the drone incident. Her face appeared behind the glass, pale and tired. She looked different, less like the loud, overconfident HOA tyrant, and more like someone who'd been haunted by what she'd seen. I decided to take the chance. I grabbed a thermos of coffee and walked across the street. Bruno followed, tail wagging nervously. When she opened the door, she looked startled. David? What are you doing here? Just wanted to talk, I said calmly. Can we? She hesitated, glancing around as if someone might be watching. Fine, but make it quick. Inside, her house was spotless, as always. The scent of lemon cleaner hung in the air. A stack of HOA folders sat neatly on the dining table. But they looked untouched. She poured herself a glass of water, hands trembling slightly. You've had people watching me, she said quietly. That's not me, I replied. You brought attention. You don't understand, Karen. What happened that night when you touched that lock, it wasn't just about HOA rules. You triggered something connected to a federal network. The people who showed up weren't pretending. Done. She frowned deeply. Federal? That's impossible. Why would the government care about a shed in our neighborhood? Because it's not just a shed. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. It's part of an emergency system for the U.S. Marshals, communication relays for disaster response. It's meant to stay quiet unless something goes wrong. Her eyes widened. You're serious? I nodded. Dead serious. And if your drone footage gets out, it could compromise that system. That means they'll have to remove it, and you'll bring agents back to this street. You don't want that kind of attention. She swallowed hard, looking down at her glass. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just thought. I know, I said gently. You thought I was hiding something dangerous, but the only danger right now is curiosity. For the first time, her voice softened. I've spent years running this neighborhood. Everyone listens to me. But lately, I feel like I've been pushing people away. Maybe I went too far. I smiled faintly. Maybe we both have things we're holding on to too tightly. For a moment, there was silence. It almost felt peaceful. Then her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, frowned, and turned the screen toward me. It was an email, the sender unknown. The subject read, "You should know what's really behind that shed." Attached was a file link. Don't open that, I warned immediately. She looked confused. Why? Because if you got that, they know you've been looking. That message isn't from a reporter or neighbor, it's bait. Before she could reply, her phone screen went black. Then it restarted on its own. Her face went pale. What's happening? They're wiping it, I said quietly. Someone just shut down your access remotely. She stared at me, fear rising again. You mean the government? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. We both knew. A loud knock echoed through her door, making us both jump. Bruno barked from behind me. Through the window, I saw the same black SUV parked outside, this time not at the curb, but right in her driveway. 2 agents stepped out. One held a tablet. The other, a sealed folder. Karen looked at me, eyes wide. David. They're following protocol, I said quietly. And if you cooperate, they'll leave you alone. The taller agent knocked again. Miss Reynolds? We need a word. She looked terrified, glancing between me and the door. Go on, I whispered. You'll be fine. She hesitated, then nodded slowly and opened the door. The agents entered politely, flashing credentials I didn't bother reading. They spoke quietly, but their tone was firm. One of them handed her the folder, instructing her to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all incidents, communications, and visual media related to my property. Karen's hands shook as she signed. The other agent took her phone and placed it into a padded envelope. "This is for your protection," he said simply. "Please refrain from any further surveillance or inquiry into restricted operations." When they left, Karen sank into a chair, her eyes glassy. "They took everything. Even my drone footage." I nodded. "They don't take risks." "So?" She looked at me, voice barely a whisper. "David, what have we gotten ourselves into?" I sighed. "Something that doesn't care about HOA rules." Outside, the SUV pulled away quietly. The neighborhood was still again, but it wasn't the same. Something had shifted. Karen finally understood. But the cost of that understanding had only just begun. The next 48 hours felt like someone had wrapped the whole neighborhood in plastic wrap. Soundless, stiff, and uncomfortable. Even the morning breeze seemed to hesitate as it passed through the trees. Normally, this was the time when people watered their lawns, jogged with headphones, or waved from their driveways. But after the black SUV visit to Karen's house, it was like the entire block decided breathing too loudly might bring trouble. Karen stayed inside. Her curtains never moved. Her porch light never came on. Every morning, I saw the newspaper boy toss a copy onto her driveway, and it would just sit there until the next day. A few neighbors whispered about it. Some said she'd had a nervous breakdown. Others thought she was arrested. But no one dared ask her. I didn't either. I wanted to give her space. After all, she'd gone from bossing everyone around to being quietly watched by people who didn't wear name tags. The U.S. Marshals weren't kidding about monitoring. I'd spotted a black sedan at the corner 3 nights in a row, engine off, driver barely visible. Still, life had to move on. I fixed fences, mowed my grass, and pretended like everything was fine. Bruno, though, could sense the tension. He'd growl at shadows that weren't there, and sit facing the shed every evening, alert, as if waiting for something to move inside it. Then one afternoon, I found another letter in my mailbox. This time, it wasn't from the government. It was from the HOA office, neatly folded in an envelope marked Emergency Meeting Notice. I frowned. Karen's signature wasn't on it. Instead, it was signed by Linda Shaw, acting HOA president. So Karen had officially stepped down. The meeting was scheduled for that evening at 7 p.m. in the community park, the same spot where Karen usually scolded people for not attending. I decided to go, partly because I wanted to see what the others thought, and partly because I needed to make sure no one stirred up more trouble. When I arrived, about 20 people had gathered. Some looked nervous, others angry. Linda stood in front with a clipboard, speaking in her usual, overly cheerful tone, trying to pretend nothing weird had been happening. "Thank you all for coming," she said, forcing a smile. "As you may know, Karen has taken a leave of absence from her position as HOA president due to personal matters." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Personal matters? You mean government men showing up at her door?" Linda cleared her throat. "We won't discuss rumors. However, there's been concern about certain activities taking place near Mr. Morris's property." I stiffened. All eyes turned to me. Linda smiled politely, the way people do when they're pretending not to be scared. "David, dear, would you mind explaining what's in that shed of yours?" "People are saying." I interrupted gently. "Linda, I can't discuss it. It's a federal matter. The authorities already cleared it." A few people gasped at the word federal. One man in the back muttered, "Told you so." Another whispered, "This is exactly how secret stuff starts." Linda shifted uncomfortably. "Well, we just want to make sure the neighborhood is safe. You understand?" "I do," I said calmly, "and it is safe, as long as no one touches it again." There was an uneasy silence. Someone coughed. Then a woman from the corner, Mrs. Parker, the one who always baked cookies for the kids, spoke up. "Karen said it was dangerous. She said you had cameras in boxes with blinking lights." I nodded. "It's not dangerous. It's part of an emergency network. It helps first responders in case of natural disasters. Nothing more." A few people looked relieved, but not everyone. A heavyset man named Ron crossed his arms. "Then why the black SUVs, huh? Why'd they take her phone?" "Sounds like government spying to me." I met his eyes. "You really think the government cares about your backyard barbecue, Ron?" A few chuckles broke the tension, but Ron didn't laugh. "All I'm saying is, we deserve to know if we're living next to something classified." I sighed. "If it were dangerous, you wouldn't be living here." Linda quickly clapped her hands. "All right, that's enough speculation." Meeting adjourned. Let's all stay calm and remember we're neighbors. People started to leave, some giving me polite nods, others avoiding my eyes. As I turned to go, I caught sight of Karen standing far behind the trees, half hidden in the shadows. She looked thinner, her eyes sunken, like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't approach, she just watched. When our eyes met, she shook her head slowly. Then she turned and disappeared into the dark. That night, I couldn't shake the image of her face. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept replaying her expression. Fear mixed with something else. Guilt. Maybe. Or knowledge. Around midnight I heard faint knocking. 3 soft taps. Bruno growled low, tail stiff. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the front door. When I opened it, no one was there. But taped to the door frame was another note. This one wasn't typed or official, it was handwritten. Rushed. The ink slightly smeared, like whoever wrote it was shaking. David, they're not what they seem. They came back to me tonight. They want something from the shed, not to protect it, but to take it. Don't trust them. Don't let them in. K. My hands tightened around the paper. I stepped outside, scanning the street. Everything was still. But under the glow of the streetlight, I noticed something strange. A tire mark. Fresh and deep. Cutting across the grass near my mailbox. SUV tires. Bruno barked again, turning toward the woods. His growl deepened. I grabbed the flashlight and walked toward the barn. The closer I got, the louder the hum became. A faint electrical buzz, coming from inside the shed. The lock light was flickering red again, like it had the night Karen tried to open it. I froze. Someone had accessed it. I pulled my phone and tried calling the contact number from the federal letter. No signal, just static. The hum grew louder, now pulsing like a heartbeat. Bruno barked furiously, pulling toward the shed. I moved closer and saw the door slightly ajar, only half an inch, but enough to see the dim glow from inside. My pulse thundered in my ears. I reached out, slowly pushing it open. Inside, one of the black crates was unlocked, its lid tilted just enough for the light to leak through. Something inside was blinking green, then red, then green again. Then a voice echoed behind me. "Step away from the door, Mr. Morris." I turned sharply. Out of the shadows, 2 figures emerged, the same men from before. But this time, they weren't calm. Their hands rested on holsters. "Did you open it?" one demanded. I shook my head slowly. "No, someone else was here." The taller one frowned. "We need to secure the equipment immediately. Get your dog inside." I hesitated. "What's going on?" He didn't answer. He just pushed past me and opened the shed fully, muttering into a small radio clipped to his jacket. Bruno barked again, his fur standing on end. The shorter agent looked at me sharply. "Get back in the house, sir. Now." And that was the moment I realized something: their badges weren't the same as before. The insignia was different, darker, unfamiliar. These weren't the same. U.S. Marshals. They were someone else entirely. The 2 men moved like soldiers, precise and wordless. One of them knelt by the crate while the other scanned the perimeter with a flashlight so bright it could have lit up half the street. Bruno barked non-stop now, backing up beside me with his hackles raised. Every instinct in me screamed that something was off, not just wrong, but wrong in a way that made my stomach twist. I'd seen the real Marshals before. They were calm, confident, not this twitchy. These men were on edge, glancing over their shoulders like they were expecting trouble. Their black jackets bore no agency patches, just faint, stitched initials I couldn't make out. The taller one finally turned to me, his tone clipped. "You were told to keep people away from this site, Mr. Morris. That includes yourself. You failed." I narrowed my eyes. "Who exactly are you?" He ignored the question. "Step back to your porch, now." "No," I said firmly, squaring my shoulders. "Not until you tell me who you're with. Show me your credentials." The shorter one glanced at his partner, then pulled something from his jacket, a badge. But when the flashlight hit it, I could tell it wasn't federal. The emblem was wrong. It wasn't the Marshal Service. It wasn't FBI or DHS either. It looked more like a private contractor's ID, one of those security firms that operated in legal gray areas. My gut clenched. "That's not a government seal." The taller one's jaw flexed. "You ask a lot of questions for a man who's supposed to stay quiet." He took a step closer, hand brushing his holster. Bruno growled low, lips curling. "I'm under a federal contract," I said slowly. "If you're not with them, you don't have clearance to be here." The man smiled faintly, that kind of smile people give when they think they're smarter than you. "Clearance changes hands, Mr. Morris. You think you're working for one group, But it's all the same pipeline. You just happened to be at the wrong end of it. He turned and motioned for his partner to begin lifting the crate. The heavy lid creaked open, revealing rows of silver-cased modules lined with coded locks. I knew what those were: encrypted relay nodes. If anyone tried to tamper with them, they'd send a digital alert straight to the U.S. Marshals network. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Those are secured." He didn't answer. The shorter agent pulled out a small black device and connected it to one of the modules. The lights on the crate flickered. A soft humming noise began, low but sharp, like static climbing through my bones. "Hey!" I shouted, taking a step forward. Before I could move closer, the taller one turned and raised his hand sharply, not in warning, but command. "Don't." I froze. Bruno barked once more, but I motioned him back. "What's your endgame?" I asked. "You steal that equipment, and you're done. The Marshals will trace it in minutes." He chuckled dryly. "You really think they're the only ones watching? There are more hands in this pie than you can imagine." His partner looked up from the device, whispering, "It's locked out. We'll need the main key." The taller man turned back to me. "You have it, don't you?" I kept my face neutral. "No. Don't lie. I'm not." He stepped forward, close enough that I could see the faint scar on his cheek. "You built part of this relay. You have a master override. Give it to us, and we'll be gone before sunrise." I didn't move. "You're not getting anything from me." And he studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, in a low, almost conversational tone, he said, "You think this shed keeps you safe? It's a pawn in something bigger. You've got a government that hides, a community that snoops, and people like me who clean up the mess when they collide. That's the truth, Mr. Morris." Before I could respond, headlights swept across the yard. The hum of engines cut through the air again, deeper this time, heavier. The men froze. 3 SUVs rolled onto the street, this time marked clearly, U.S. Marshals Service, real ones. The 2 imposters exchanged glances. The shorter one hissed, "We're out of time." The taller one pulled something from his belt, not a gun, but a signal jammer. He pressed a button, and the shed lights blinked out instantly. Total darkness swallowed the yard. "Bruno, inside!" I shouted, running for the porch. Behind me, I heard the chaos unfold: shouts, heavy boots pounding against gravel, engines revving. Then the sharp crack of gunfire echoed through the quiet neighborhood. 1, 2, then silence. The lights from the real SUVs flashed red and blue, bathing the trees in color again. I ducked behind the porch, railing. Bruno pressed tight to my side, trembling. Within minutes, voices shouted commands. "Drop your weapon, hands where we can see them." When the shooting stopped, I peeked through the porch railing. The 2 imposters were on the ground, surrounded by marshals. One was still moving, clutching his shoulder. The other lay face down, motionless. The tall marshal from before the real one stepped forward, barking orders. "Secure the shed. Get tech in here now." He spotted me crouched by the porch and waved me over. "You all right, Mr. Morris?" I stood slowly, heart still pounding. "They weren't yours." "No," he said grimly. "They weren't. We've been tracking a rogue contractor group for months. They were stealing classified relay units and selling the tech. We didn't think they'd find you this fast." I exhaled shakily. "Karen warned me." His brow furrowed. "Karen Reynolds?" "She left me a note, said they came back to her." He cursed under his breath. "That explains the leak. They must have followed her home from the last sweep." Bruno whimpered softly as the agents moved around the shed, locking it down again. The marshal put a hand on my shoulder. "We'll be relocating the equipment tonight. It's compromised now. You've done everything right. But we can't risk another breach." "So it's over?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "Not quite. We'll need you for debriefing. And we'll need to keep an eye on the HOA president, just in case she's targeted again." I looked toward Karen's dark house across the street. The curtains were still drawn, but I thought I saw movement behind them. "Hasn't she been through enough?" I asked. The marshal's expression softened slightly. "People like her stumble into storms without realizing how big they are. Sometimes they walk out changed. Sometimes they don't walk out at all." As they loaded the crates into the armored truck, the sun began to rise, pale orange light creeping over the roofs, washing away the night's violence. The air smelled of metal and rain. By the time they were done, the shed was empty, just a shell of wood and dust where the secrets used to hum. The marshal approached one last time, handing me an envelope. "Official notice of closure," he said. "You're released from contract. But you didn't hear any of this, understand?" I nodded silently. As the convoy rolled away, leaving ruts in the gravel, I looked around the quiet neighborhood that once fussed about fences and mailboxes. Now, it was a crime scene that would never make the news. And somewhere behind her curtains, I knew Karen was watching, maybe relieved, maybe haunted. Either way, neither of us would ever look at this street the same again. The next few days passed like a strange dream, the kind where everything looks normal but feels off, like the world's still spinning from something it shouldn't have seen. The U.S. Marshals had cleared out, leaving behind nothing but tracks in the gravel and a faint hum of silence that clung to the air. The shed, my so-called violation, now sat empty. They'd taken everything. Every wire, every crate, every secret. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every night, a black sedan sat parked near the intersection. Lights off, engine quiet. It wasn't the Marshals anymore, I could tell by how still it stayed. Whoever was in there wasn't protecting me. They were observing. Karen hadn't stepped outside since that night of chaos. Neighbors whispered about her, some said she'd gone paranoid, others thought she'd moved away. But I knew better. She was still there, hiding behind those floral curtains, probably afraid of what she'd started. On the 5th morning, a soft knock came at my door. I opened it to find her standing there, pale and hollow-eyed, clutching a manila envelope like it was her lifeline. "Karen?" I said softly. "You all right?" She looked around nervously before stepping inside. "We need to talk," she whispered. I closed the door and gestured for her to sit, but she refused. Her hands trembled as she placed the envelope on the table. "They came back," she said. "Not the Marshals, the others, the ones with no names." I felt my chest tighten. "When?" "2 nights ago," she said. "They parked outside my house around midnight. Knocked on my door. Said they needed to verify something. They didn't show badges, just that same dark patch on their sleeves. I didn't let them in, but one of them slipped this under the door." I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were 2 photographs, one of me standing near the shed a few weeks ago, and another of Karen holding her drone controller, zoomed in from a long distance. Both pictures had red circles drawn around our faces. Beneath them was a note, typed and unsigned. "You both saw what you shouldn't have. Stay quiet and stay in your homes. Interference will not be tolerated." My stomach turned cold. I'd expected something like this eventually, but seeing it in print made it real. Karen's voice wavered. "I think they bugged my house, David. My phone won't stay on. My Wi-Fi drops every time I try to call anyone. And last night, my power flickered for hours. I could hear faint clicking from the walls like static. I rubbed my temples, trying to think. They're probably monitoring electronic signals. The rogue contractors might have planted surveillance devices before they were caught." Her eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted to enforce the HOA rules. I didn't mean for any of this." I sighed. "I know. But the moment they saw your drone footage, you became a liability. They think you know more than you do." She looked down, her voice trembling. "Then what do we do?" For a moment, I didn't answer. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and a crow cawed in the distance. Bruno sat near the door, tail thumping softly, his brown eyes fixed on her like he could sense her fear. "We keep calm," I said finally, "and we gather proof, real proof that they're still operating here. If they think we're scared, they'll push harder." Karen's eyes widened. "Proof? You mean spy on them?" "Something like that," I said. "You've still got that drone, don't you?" She hesitated. "They took it." I smiled faintly. "You're lying." Her lips pressed together, then she sighed. "Fine. I hid it. Under the deck." "Good," I said. "Then tonight, we use it." She looked horrified. "David, are you out of your mind? If they catch us..." "They already know who we are," I interrupted. "But the Marshals need evidence to come back. If we can get footage of whoever's been tailing us, we can hand it over directly." She looked torn between fear and guilt, but after a long pause, she nodded. "All right. One time. Tonight." We agreed to meet by her backyard at 11 p.m., when the street went dark and quiet. I spent the evening checking my old security equipment, motion sensors, portable cameras, a thermal scanner I'd kept from my engineering days. Nothing fancy, but enough to help us see without being seen. At exactly 11, I slipped through the side gate and crossed to Karen's backyard. The air was cool, heavy with dew. She was waiting, crouched by the deck, her face pale in the moonlight. She pulled out the drone, a small, white quadcopter with a mounted night vision camera. "You sure about this?" she whispered. I nodded. "Once it's up, keep it high and steady. Don't hover too long." She powered it on, the soft hum blending with the crickets. The drone lifted silently, its red and green lights faint in the mist. Through her phone screen, we saw the familiar rooftop stretch out beneath it. "Move toward the intersection," I said. "That's where the sedan parks." The camera panned slowly until the dark shape of the car came into view. Sure enough, it was there, same black body, same tinted windows. But something was different. The driver's door was open. "Zoom in," I whispered. She pinched the screen, and the image sharpened. Two men stood beside the car, speaking quietly. One pointed toward my house. The other held what looked like a small metal box with antennas. "Recording," Karen said, her voice trembling. "Hold it steady," I murmured. The drone drifted closer, maybe too close. One of the men suddenly looked up, his face tilted directly toward the camera. His eyes glowed faintly under the streetlight. "Back away," I hissed. Karen tried, but the drone's signal started glitching. The screen froze, then flashed white. "They're jamming it," I shouted. The phone went dark. A second later, the drone dropped out of the sky with a sharp, metallic clink. Karen gasped. "Oh no." "Inside," I said quickly. We rushed into her house and locked the doors. Bruno barked at the window, low and uneasy. Through the blinds, I saw headlights flash once at the end of the street like a silent warning. Then the car backed away and disappeared into the night. Karen collapsed onto her couch, shaking. "They saw us. They know we were watching." I nodded grimly. "Good. That means they're nervous." She looked up at me, horrified. "You call that good?" "Fear makes people reckless," I said quietly. "And reckless people make mistakes." We sat in silence for a moment, both catching our breath. Then I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. "Before your drone went down, it transmitted a partial feed to your phone. It auto-backs up to cache." Her eyes widened. "You think it saved something?" "I know it did." She stared at me for a long time, then whispered, "You really do work for them, don't you?" I hesitated. "Not anymore." Before she could ask what I meant, I stood. "Get some rest, Karen. Tomorrow morning we'll see what your drone caught. And if we're lucky, we'll finally learn who those men are." She nodded weakly, clutching the flash drive like a fragile promise. As I stepped outside, the sky was starting to gray with the first hint of dawn. The air felt different, charged, like something unseen was waking up with the sun. And deep down, I knew that tonight wasn't the end of our trouble. It was only the start of the truth unraveling. The morning after our drone mishap felt tense, like the world had pressed pause. Every sound outside seemed sharper, the hum of lawnmowers, the crunch of tires on gravel, even the wind brushing against the windows. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face looking up into the drone camera. Those cold, glowing eyes that didn't belong in any quiet neighborhood. At 7 a.m., I brewed coffee and watched the sunrise from my porch. Bruno sat beside me, his tail tapping nervously against the floorboards. Across the street, Karen's curtains were still drawn. I wasn't sure if she'd slept either. When she finally emerged an hour later, she looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair tied back. The same manila envelope tucked under her arm. She crossed the road quickly and came up the steps without saying a word. "You got it?" I asked quietly. She nodded, holding out the flash drive. "It was in my phone's cache, just like you said. I didn't open it. I couldn't." I took it gently. "Good. Let's look at it together." Inside, I plugged the drive into my old laptop, one I kept offline for security reasons. The screen flickered as the files loaded. There were 2 short videos labeled Auto, Backup 1, and Auto, Backup 2, each only a few seconds long. I clicked the first. It started with static, then cleared to the view from the drone rooftops, streetlights, and the black sedan near the intersection. The 2 men stood beside it again, one holding that metal box with antennas. But this time, we could hear faint audio. Interference from the relay's old key, the signature still active. The other man replied, his voice low and cold. "Then, he's still got it. The engineer. We take him next." Karen gasped. "They mean you?" I paused the video, my pulse quickening. They were looking for a key, a physical access chip that activates the relay's data link. The one they tried to make me hand over that night. She frowned. But you said the Marshals took everything. They did, I said slowly. But they never took the key. It's not in the shed. Karen's eyes widened. Then where is it? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small metal capsule attached to my keychain, plain looking, but sealed tight. I unscrewed the cap halfway to reveal a thin, glassy card, no bigger than a coin. Right here, I said. They'll never find it. She stared at it like it was radioactive. So that little thing is what they're after? I nodded. Without it, they can't decrypt or duplicate the network's communication pattern. It's worthless to anyone who doesn't know how it works. But if they get it, they could listen in on federal systems. She finished, quietly. Exactly. I closed the capsule and slipped it back into my pocket. Then I clicked on the second video file. This one was shorter, blurrier, but the frame froze just long enough for us to see the same man from the night before staring straight at the drone. Only this time, his mouth moved clearly enough to read the words, "We see you." Karen stepped back, hand over her mouth. Oh my God. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Not a gentle one, 3 sharp, heavy knocks that rattled the frame. Bruno barked immediately, his deep growl echoing through the living room. I motioned for Karen to stay quiet and approached the door slowly. Who is it? No answer. I looked through the peephole. Nothing but a black shape blocking the light. My heart thudded. Then came another 3 knocks, slower this time. Karen whispered, "Don't open it." I hesitated, then decided to risk it. I cracked the door just an inch. Standing there was a uniformed postal worker, cap pulled low, sunglasses hiding his eyes. "Morning, sir. Special delivery for a Mr. David Morris." He held a small brown package in his gloved hand. No return address, no postage mark. I didn't reach for it. "Who sent that?" "Didn't say," he replied, voice flat. "Just said to make sure you got it personally." Something felt wrong. His stance was too rigid, too rehearsed. "Set it down," I said quietly. He hesitated, then placed the box on the porch railing and walked away without another word. He didn't head toward the mail truck. He went straight down the street and turned the corner on foot. I waited until he was gone, then carefully brought the box inside. Karen stood at a distance, her hands trembling. "Do you think it's from them?" she asked. "Only one way to find out." I used a utility knife to slice it open. Inside was a small portable hard drive wrapped in black tape. A single note sat on top. "You can't protect what's already been copied." I froze. "They got in." Karen's voice shook. "Into what?" "The network," I said. "They must have breached one of the relay backups before it was moved. If that's true, they have partial access to encrypted transmissions, maybe even classified channels." She took a step closer, whispering, "Then they don't need you anymore." Her words hit me like a punch. She was right. If they already had the data, the only loose ends left were the people who'd seen too much me and her. A sudden crash shattered the silence. The window by the kitchen exploded inward, glass spraying across the floor. Bruno barked furiously as a small metal canister rolled to a stop and started hissing white smoke. "Down!" I yelled, grabbing Karen and pulling her behind the couch. The smoke filled the room fast, thick, and bitter. My eyes stung, my lungs burned. Through the haze, I heard footsteps outside, multiple pairs, moving fast. "Stay down," I whispered, coughing. Karen clutched my arm, terrified. "They're here." I reached under the couch and pulled out my old emergency radio, flipping the switch. The signal crackled, but faintly then, a voice cut through the static. "This is Marshal Command. Stand by, Mr. Morris. Units inbound." My heart pounded. They were listening. They'd been listening the whole time. I dragged Karen toward the back door. "We need to move." We stumbled into the backyard, coughing through the smoke. The sound of engines roared down the street, black SUVs again, this time from both directions. Red and blue lights flashed through the mist. "Get on the ground!" someone shouted from the front yard. "Federal agents!" Karen froze, hands shaking in the air. "Is it really them this time?" she cried. I wasn't sure myself until I saw the same tall marshal from before emerge through the smoke, weapon drawn but steady. He locked eyes with me and shouted, "We've got you, Morris. Stay still." The imposters, whoever they were, had vanished into the chaos. By the time the smoke cleared, only shattered glass and tire marks remained. The marshal helped us up, his expression grave. "You two all right?" Karen coughed. "I think so." He nodded. You were right to hold on to the key. We intercepted a data breach 2 hours ago, traced it right here. Someone was trying to flush you out. I handed him the metal capsule. Then it ends now. He took it carefully. We'll make sure of that. As the marshals packed up, I looked around at what was left of my house. Broken windows, overturned chairs, the faint smell of smoke still hanging in the air. Karen stood beside me, silent, staring at the ground. For the first time, there was no judgment in her eyes, just exhaustion. She whispered, "I wish I'd just left your shed alone." I managed a tired smile. Yeah, me too. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not until we found out who those men really worked for and why they wanted the data so badly. The morning after the raid was strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just empty, like the world had taken a breath and didn't know how to exhale. The marshals had left before dawn, taking the capsule and the hard drive with them. My house looked like a crime scene. Shattered glass, overturned furniture, white powder residue from the gas canister still clinging to the carpet. The faint smell of smoke lingered like a reminder that peace had become a thing of the past. Karen sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. She hadn't said much since the chaos last night. Her eyes were red, and her voice when it came was barely a whisper. They're gone for good now, right? I stared out the window. The morning light hit the empty space where the shed used to stand. No one disappears for good in situations like this. They'll resurface when they want something. She sighed shakily, her shoulders trembling. I keep thinking about everything I did. All those letters I sent you, the complaints, the calls. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood. But I started all this, didn't I? I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't the Karen the neighborhood gossiped about anymore, the clipboard warrior or the self-appointed law enforcer. She was just a woman who'd gone too far trying to feel in control. No, I said softly. You didn't start it. You just pulled the cover off something that was already rotting underneath. Her gaze lifted to me, guilt flickering behind her eyes. They said I saw something I shouldn't have. What was it exactly? What were they hiding? I hesitated. That relay system was never just for emergency communications. It was part of a classified surveillance program, one that monitored high-risk data transfers between government agencies. It was supposed to be used to stop cyber attacks, but someone figured out how to exploit it. Those fake agents were working for whoever wanted that backdoor access. Her breath caught. So it was a spy network? In a way, yes, I said, and we were standing right on top of it. She looked down at her hands. And now it's gone? I shook my head. Not gone. Moved. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, a garbage truck rumbled down the street. The neighborhood had started pretending everything was fine again, people mowing lawns, walking dogs, kids riding scooters. But the quiet glances they gave my house told another story. They all knew something had happened. They just didn't know what. At around noon, a knock echoed at the door. My chest tightened immediately. Bruno barked once, alert but not aggressive. I opened it carefully to find the tall marshal standing there again, the one who'd led every operation since the beginning. "Mr. Morris," he greeted, nodding politely. "Miss Reynolds." Karen froze. "Is it over?" He sighed. "For now, yes. We've confirmed the 2 men who attacked you were part of a private intelligence network contracted by a rogue tech company. They were selling classified access to the highest bidder. The relay data was a piece of that system. You both became collateral." Karen swallowed. "What happens now?" "You'll both be under observation for a few months, standard procedure. We'll place security around the neighborhood quietly. Nothing intrusive. But I'd advise keeping your routines simple. No travel, no online posts about the incident, no talking to reporters." I nodded. "And the capsule?" "Secured," he said. "Locked in a classified vault. No one's touching it again." He reached into his pocket and handed me a card. "If anything unusual happens, unmarked vehicles, new faces, tech interference, call this number immediately." I took it. "Thank you." He gave Karen a kind nod. "You did the right thing, Miss Reynolds, even if it didn't feel like it. Most people would have panicked and gone public. You kept quiet. That saved lives." She looked stunned. "I thought I ruined everything." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes the truth hides behind mistakes." Then he left, disappearing into another black SUV that rolled silently down the street. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The sound of the engine fading into the distance felt final, like the last page of a chapter that had taken too long to end. Finally, Karen stood, brushing her hands over her jeans. "I think I should resign from the HOA." I smiled lightly. "That's probably the best decision you've made all year." She laughed softly, her first real laugh in weeks. "You know, David, when I first moved here, I thought rules were what kept people safe. But now I think kindness does a better job." I nodded. "Rules matter, but only if they're meant to protect, not control." She gave a small smile and started toward the door, then turned back. "You'll tell me if they come back, right?" "Always," I said. "And you'll tell me if you start spying on me again, right?" She grinned faintly. "Deal." When she left, I sat there for a while, listening to the ticking of the clock and the rustling of leaves outside. Bruno rested his head on my foot, eyes drooping. I reached down and scratched behind his ear. "We made it, buddy. Somehow." But as peaceful as the day seemed, something inside me stayed uneasy. The Marshals might have called it over, but I'd seen enough in my life to know that over was just a polite word for on hold. Later that evening, I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool, the sun just beginning to dip behind the trees. Across the street, Karen's house was quiet, the curtains open now. She was sitting by her window with a book, looking almost normal again. Then I noticed something, a faint glint of light from the wooded hill behind the neighborhood. Not bright, not obvious, but rhythmic. 3 short flashes, then a pause. Then 3 more. Morse code. I froze, heart pounding. The pattern repeated. 3 short bursts. S-O-S. S-S. I grabbed my binoculars from the porch shelf and focused on the hill. For a brief second, I saw the outline of a figure standing there, tall, motionless, watching. Then, it vanished into the trees. Bruno barked sharply, snapping me out of it. I lowered the binoculars and exhaled slowly. "No," I muttered. "Not again." Still, I couldn't shake the chill crawling up my spine. If it was them, if they'd returned, it meant the relay system wasn't the only thing left behind. Maybe there were more caches. Maybe the project had deeper layers, things the Marshals themselves didn't know about. I went back inside and sat at my desk, opening a fresh notebook. At the top, I wrote 1 sentence. "If they come again, I'll be ready." I spent the next hour jotting down everything. I remembered license plate fragments, voice details, equipment descriptions, timestamps. I wasn't going to be blindsided twice. Outside, the sky grew darker, and the familiar hum of night filled the air. The world looked normal again, but I knew better. The kind of people who move in shadows never stop for long. Before bed, I took one last look toward the woods. Nothing moved. No lights. Just stillness. I whispered into the quiet, "Let this be done." But deep down, I already knew it wasn't. Because secrets don't die when the truth comes out. They just find new places to hide. Where are you watching from?